All right, guys, just getting ready to go live. I always try to start these just a couple minutes so that people who log on a little late are able to not miss anything. And I do try to be timely and respect the time for those who are waiting or who perhaps are not quite ready to go. So today is going to be the our latest Ask Me Anything. And just for those who are actually watching, I'm wearing my vintage Columbia College shirt here. It's 30 years old, so it's just kind of funny. But thank you guys for joining me on the Ask Me Anything live stream today. The probably some of the topics that we're going to be covering, or I'm hoping to try to cover today, is going to have some details as it relates to just the impact of the initiatives. I want to make sure I just address that a little bit. I did 3 videos. I was able to record 3 videos today. One of the videos is going to be kind of detailing the the number of bonds and levies that kind of failed around the state and where that happened. So which ones got shot down during the special election. And then also discussing the impact of the initiatives on the legislative session and the sudden change. I did a quick video about this, about the sudden change of the legislature and actually being willing to hold some hearings on it. So I want to discuss that a little bit before we jump into some of the questions here. And then another thing I want to talk about is the other video that I did was actually on the rent control bill, which is a fascinating situation because it's a dumb idea. It's a 100-year-old idea, of course. And like all bad ideas, it's like socialism. Every time they try it and it fails, then they decide that let's go and see if we can try it again because this time will be different. And so the status of that bill and where it's at in the state Senate is kind of an interesting one. It's a stupid, dumb idea, and we can talk about why it doesn't work. But that's just one that we can also discuss here as well. The one thing I do try to mention in the beginning of the videos, just based on popular requests before we jump into some of these questions, and just a real quick reminder, if you're going to put a question up, please try to make sure that you say @We the Governed. That way I can actually tell that it's a question and pull it out. Every single time I do one of these, there's always somebody that says I ignored their question. And usually I don't try to ignore any questions. I try to get to them. So just make it easier for me to actually see what the question actually is, and it just makes it a little bit easier for me to spot it as the questions are going up and down the screen. And I'm trying to multitask a little bit here. Just a real quick updates on where I'm going to be over the next couple weeks anyway. I'm actually going to be in the Tri-Cities for a couple days, but I don't really have any public. I'm meeting with activists, and I'm doing a little fundraiser out there for myself, a couple little things I'm doing while I'm out there. But I don't really have any specific public events that I'm doing while I'm in Eastern Washington for the next couple days. Next weekend, I am going to be, or next week, I should say next Thursday, so the 29th, last day, the leap year of February, the leap day of February here. I'm going to be up in the Okanagan doing a presentation. I believe it's in OMAC. It's in the evening, and it'll be a presentation. It sounds like it's oriented more for young activists up there. I always like to do training sessions out there, so I anticipate that I'll be out there if you happen to be in the Okanagan that day. And a couple days later, I will be the MC in Lewis County. I am being told that we should have a really good presentation there. Jonathan Cho and Ari Hoffman are going to be speaking. I believe we're going to do a panel presentation, and I'll probably moderate that a little bit. There'll be some good auction items. I believe this is the 3rd year in a row that I've MC'd the Lewis County Lincoln Day Dinner, and that's always fun. It's close to my house, so it's a good place to come up and say hi. Whenever I'm MCing, I'm a little busy there, but I'll stay late, come early. So if you're there at that event, I'm happy to see you there and chat. The next week, I know I'm going to be doing similar MC work with the Kitsap County Republican Party Lincoln Day Dinner event. And possibly, and this is still yet to be determined, I may be doing a training session up in Kitsap County for activists a few days early. If you've followed my videos on my video channel, I put out a video. These are always like the least watched videos. It's like public service videos, I think, where I'm just offering to come out and do training for activists locally. And nobody's interested in watching those videos, but people are usually interested in going to those events. So if you are interested in that, I just organize a group locally and contact me, and I'll find a way to try to fit that into the schedule. We'll find a day that works. And I do like to do those in person if I can. Anywhere in Washington State, I'll usually go to Oregon and Idaho if necessary. If it's further out than that, then we have to talk a little bit more about travel arrangements. But otherwise, I'm here to try to help make things happen and to help give you the tools to make things happen, showing you how you can show up and be more effective, I hope, as an activist, and anything I can do to make that process more efficient and effective with as many people as possible is kind of one of my goals, mission in life, and the reason why I'm out here doing this stuff, trying to make a difference for liberty and freedom. It's out and meeting people in person. I actually do a lot more stuff in person than you would think if you're just watching this video channel, because I don't usually videotape most of my public presentations, and but I've been doing those for years, and I do find them to be effective and impactful. So if you want to organize one where you live with your favorite local 30 or 40 activists in your community, I'm happy to come out there and help. And I do that on college campuses as well. If you got a group and you feel like you're the conservative underground, I'll help you be the rebellion and cause great drama and angst for the lefty administration that probably is trashing your college right now, which is why I'm wearing my vintage Columbia University shirt. So anyway, one of the other things that I thought I would mention in regards to just some of the other activities, I've occasionally been approached to speak outside the state to other groups and events. I don't usually do as much of that, but I may be, just because I've had a lot more people have been approaching me to come out and do some of that for them. So I may be traveling a little bit more to other states, just trying to teach activists and collaborate or come up with new and more effective tools and ways. I hate using the word tools, that sounds weak, but just coming up with more effective ways of making an impact in their community where they live. And it's just, I think that people need to talk to people that have done a lot of this stuff before. And frankly, I've made every mistake I think you can make as an activist over time. And once you've made those mistakes, you can actually teach people how to avoid the mistakes you've already made and how to do the things that you found to be more successful. It doesn't really matter which state you're in. If you're in a Republican state and you think everything's great, well, you're delusional. There's going to be plenty of problems where you live too. I think having local teams of activists wherever you live, heavily engaged and involved in their community, at least tracking what's going on, and being willing to push back or confront corruption or dishonesty wherever you live is really an important thing to have. I mean, today you may be focused on one topic, but because you've worked together with those people for a while, that skill set tends to be applied to whatever new drama or problem or issue that you have to deal with in the future. So it's just a really good thing about just stuff that make an impact for freedom and liberty. As long as you care about freedom and liberty, then I'm probably on your side, and we can go from there. So it isn't Ask Me Anything live stream. Post your questions here. I'll do my best to answer them. And I will start here. There is Karen. You had a question that you actually got up here even before I went live, and I saw this, and it said, here's the question. Why did Slade Gorton allow WSRP shill Brandi Kruse to donate more dollars than allowed for Reichert? Did Reichert give you a date he's going to appear on your PC? That's the actual question, and let me do my best to try to answer it. I actually looked up the Public Disclosure Commission report, and at least as far as I can tell, Brandi Kruse didn't donate more than was allowed. I saw two different contributions from her. One a nominal amount, like $89, something like that, and the other one a $2,400 amount. And just so you know, for statewide candidates, they have a higher threshold for what can be contributed to their campaign, and it's $2,400 in the primary, $2,400 in the general. So in total, it's actually $4,800 from any one source. And so it looks like she's given about half of what she can donate. So I'm not sure that Slade Gorton has anything to do with this. So. And he's no longer with us, so I'm not really sure why Slade Gorton was brought up. But obviously, Brandi Kruse, like anybody else, can donate money to whatever political candidate they want. And I did talk to Reichert a while ago. I think I mentioned this about coming on my show because I interviewed Semi Bird, as anybody who's watched the channel lately probably knows. And usually if it's in the primary setting, I don't usually interview people when they're still in the primary and there's other Republicans in the race. Then I'll try to interview. It's only fair that I also let other people who are also running in that same race that I interview them as well. But it's really not. It hasn't happened yet just because of scheduling more than anything else. And it's scheduling two ways. One is mine, and the days that I have a studio available, or I have to set it up remotely and do an interview remotely, and that's just a little bit more logistically challenging because I have to have a team of people that just the little insider stuff if you're doing an interview. If you want an effective interview, this is my opinion, and so maybe I'm letting the an aspiration of what I would want that interview to look like be defeat the purpose of ever getting an interview done. I don't think so, but usually what I try to do is set up at least 3 cameras, one on the person you're interviewing, one on the person who's the interviewee, and then another camera that is an establishing shot. That's kind of the way. Even when you're on the road, you try to do these. I've done a couple interviews with Brian Haywood, for example, who's also a busy guy and hard to nail down. And so I had to get a team of a local team that I had that was a friend that it was close enough that I could get him set up up near where Brian Haywood was around. And so that's how I did that interview. But most interviews I've done here in studio, which is a much better setup here in Vancouver, but it's down in Clark County, which is not close to a lot of the people that I'd like to interview. So I need to come up with a better system to interview people on the road, and that's something I'm still kind of working on. But I'm going to be happy to interview Reichert when I get a chance to. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, and I'm not calling every day on it, so it's not like there's that kind of pressure out there. He knows that I've offered, his consultants know, and campaign manager knows, and it's just a matter of getting it scheduled. So, and I think it'd be interesting video. I'm not a gotcha guy in these kind of questions when I'm trying to talk to people who are in theory, people that are roughly on the same page that we are. I want to know what they believe, what they would do when they get into office. It's nothing super secret. It's not hard to figure out what I'm interested in asking and what I'll ask. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And if I can get my act together here this year, I'd like to interview some of the other people that are running for various statewide activities. Hey, there's sometimes if you're trying to ask me a question, you're just going to have to be, use spell check, go back and look at your question to see if you can understand what you're asking me, because I'm not going to try to read it if I can't even understand what you're saying. There's a question here from Sade 2100. Your activities exposing malfeasance of our political leadership. What has been your experience across the political spectrum? Do you catch conservatives as much as liberals? Good question. And mostly because I live in a state that's controlled at all levels of government, essentially by the Democrat Party or factions of the Democrat Party. I don't think it's always fair to just say, okay, the Democrats control this particular body and have it be monolithic. It's not the same, right? So a conservative Democrat somewhere, the few that are left, are going to be very different, for instance, in government and how they operate in government than a crazy socialist out of Seattle, right? That may call themselves a Democrat for political reasons, but they're really just a crazy socialist. So there's actually quite a few differences there. Because the only people in power, any significant power in Washington State, are going to be Democrats, and the Democrat Party has controlled most levels of power in government, then it's just logical you're going to have more corruption in the Democrat Party than you would in the Republican Party. Think about this. If you were... It's not always the politics create the corruption. Sometimes it's the power, whoever's in charge. There's corrupt people out there that they would corrupt no matter what party label they want to call themselves. Where would totally corrupt people who don't really care about, they don't have a political philosophy at all, where would they go to be corrupt? You're not going to go and join the Republican Party because they don't control anything. So why would you bother? If you are a corrupt criminal or somebody who has criminal inclinations, you're going to go join the Democrat Party because they're the ones running the show. That's going to be what you do. So it's only logical. In fact, it would be insanely irrational for me to actually not have a heck of a lot more people that are corrupt inside the Democrat Party in Washington State. If the Republicans control Washington State for 40 years, it'd probably be different. Now, that being said, I've definitely run into corruption problems of people who have called themselves Republicans. I've gone after commissioners in Eastern Washington before. I remember a Douglas County commission that I went after a number of years ago, where they were all Republicans and there was missing assets. It was some issues I ran into there. But my experience is generally is that it just matters who's in political power. I mean, that's just how it works. Then let's see the next question. If it's not a question, I'm not going to probably read it because there's a lot of comments that get posted up. Brian B., if you didn't discuss it last week, can you talk about the Thurston County manager hire? Oh, that's a good one. And you know what? I didn't talk about it last week. So, Brian, thank you for asking. That was a good question. So, and I'm not going to be able to talk as much about it right now as I need to because there's a couple local activists that I do a lot of work with in Thurston County, and I haven't had a chance to sit down with them and review just a couple things that I'm trying to review, just having to do with some budget and finance problems, in addition to some unfortunately bad behavior of at least one and probably two of the recently elected county commissioners or county commissioners right now, because we're still a commission structure, even though it's 5 members instead of 3. Since I've been in Thurston County, we're working on our 4th county manager. The previous 3, in my opinion, were driven out just simply by the fact that citizens were willing to expose all kinds of problems associated with their administration of the county. The county manager, especially in a big enough county like Thurston County, we have about 300,000 people live here. So it's a big enough county where the county managers have a substantial amount of control and power and influence over what goes on, especially if the county commissioners have surrendered some of their executive sort of authority or responsibility to the county manager, which is typically what happens. And so when they've done that, that county manager ends up becoming a gatekeeper on a lot of issues. They set the agenda for the meetings generally. Sure, the county commissioners can intervene and add or possibly move things around on the agenda, but it takes a lot of assertive behavior by the county commissioners to do that. The other thing is the county manager really determines how the budget and money is flowing, who the contract vendors are. Sure, the county commissioners vote on final contracts, but what happens is the county manager has the ability to filter out good people, or in theory, they're supposed to filter out bad people. They have the ability to ensure whether it's just going to be one corruption gravy train, like Thurston County typically is, or maybe they're going to be a little more honest and have good people as their vendors. There's all kinds of things that the county manager has a lot of control over, and that position's super important. So when you have turnover like we recently did, that opens up this vacuum that can either go worse, or maybe if you're lucky and you can accidentally get somebody honest or good in there. That I think is unlikely in Thurston County in the short term. So I want to talk more about this, but I want to get into some of the details of my concerns about the current county manager approach and some of the other senior leadership in Thurston County and what that likely means for people who live here. Then let's see. One Yankee, this isn't a question, but without sufficient punishment, bad behavior is not deterred. That's usually true, although being exposed, bad behavior's exposure does sometimes lead to deterrent in different ways. That's a longer conversation. Jason Fitcher got a question here. Did Fannie Willis violate campaign finance laws storing money under her mattress? And how would this apply to Washington? Okay, so this is a funny question. And so she's a local candidate in Georgia. So she's a prosecutor who got caught basically violating all ethics laws. Actually, this doesn't matter what county or which state you live in. You're really not supposed to sleep with your subordinates and then use that relationship to direct high-paid contracts for which they're not qualified, and then keep it secret, and then go out and use that person's income that you've suddenly given to them as a way to take junkets around the world and vacations. That's unethical. Now that part specifically is not a violation of campaign finance laws necessarily, and I don't know Georgia's that well, but presumably most of these campaign finance laws generally match. There's generally similarities between Washington and Colorado or Oregon or California. Most states will generally have some kind of campaign finance laws and rules which are mostly similar. They're not always identical. Where she potentially did run into it, and by the way, taking campaign cash and as cash, so campaign funds as cash, and sticking them in a box, that's not illegal by itself either. It's weird, and it's certainly hard to track, but it's not illegal. Most campaign finance laws would allow you to have the cash, the money in a cash pile under your mattress, just as easily as they'd allow you to have it in the bank. It'd be strange. It'd be weird. In Washington, I think you would probably run into some problems, mostly from how you're accounting for how that money's spent, but because your bank balance, if you look at actually line 18 on the C4 reports and most campaign finance reports in Washington, in theory, it needs to be your bank balance plus cash, but typically no campaign has this cash laying around somewhere. So you can audit a C4 report by looking at bank balances and compare them to line 18 on C4 reports each month. So that's kind of one of the issues that it comes in, how you basically reconcile accuracy in campaign finance laws. Where she ran into trouble is if she used campaign money, whether it was sitting in a cash pile under her mattress or in a safety deposit box or just in the bank itself, she takes that money and then she's spending that on vacation trips, which is what she's kind of implying that she's doing with that, taking her campaign money and then using it to go to the Bahamas or go to whatever vacation or fancy non-campaign related activities. In most states, that would be considered a violation of campaign finance laws. And it sounds like the way she related that, that she was breaking the law in Georgia. And you would definitely be breaking the law here. I would have a heyday in Washington with somebody who had that kind of public testimony with how they did their money, and that'd be quite fun actually. I'd enjoy that one. But she broke it in Georgia, and so I'm not sure what the rules are there. Let's see. So one Yankee says, "What about the no good righties?" I'm assuming you're referring to people who are on the right side of the political spectrum and who are also corrupt and dishonest. I have the same problems with them that I would with the Democrats that are corrupt, even if supposedly where policies are aligned. I don't have really any room for corruption, right? So that if you're going to be going in there and stealing money, that may be just another day at the office if you're an average bureaucrat or Democrat right now. But you have no excuse. You particularly have no excuse if you're supposedly somebody who wants to have a smaller government, more liberty and freedom. Then stealing the state's money is not going to be a good way of demonstrating your true how you feel about these things. Shannon, I got a question here. Can you go over the 3 initiatives that are being held back and explain what they will try to do to make our petitioning weak by making a companion initiative? Sure, I'll happily do that. So, and I did a video on this, so I'm going to steal some of my own thunder of that video when it comes out. No initiatives are being held back. So first of all, there needs to be a little bit of clarity. I know that word got out. I got a bunch of text messages about it over the last couple of days, and I was trying to respond to people individually, but it's good to deal with it here in just a more public setting. You have 6 initiatives, right? And 3 of them are particularly threatening to the left because they affect the grifting operations, and it's billions of dollars, right, of grifting operations of taxpayer dollars that they're extracting from you one way or another, and then in turn using that to profit or fund their friends or recycle that cash in some way to run their little mini empires. And so that's the biggest one, of course, is the capital gains, or not the capital gains, but the carbon tax scam. So that's the tax that Inslee championed to put on basically gas, mainly gas, but propane and natural gas too as well. You're paying more for that. And remember, Bob Ferguson intervened with the the utilities to prevent them from revealing how much they were actually increasing the cost of the natural gas or propane that they're providing to people because of this stupid tax. All that money, 1.3 billion or so, 1.8 billion, depending on how you look at it, suddenly comes into this coffers. Well, that's a lot of money. You got to pay off a lot of your friends. You got to hire all kinds of grants. Kick it. I mean, it's just one big gravy train that you're doing, and that's threatened by one of these initiatives. So that one is the left is going to view that existential threat, right? That's Inslee's told drama, and it's super unpopular. So that's a big threat. Second one is capital gains tax, which is essentially just another slush fund into the general fund too. I mean, these are slush fund pots, and that is, they claim that they're taking money from the rich. They're just going to take, if you weren't like Jeff Bezos and you just left the state, which Jeff did, Bezos left so that he could sell his, so he wouldn't be subject to the capital gains tax. So the real billionaires that you supposedly claim you're going to get, they're just going to leave the state like Bezos did, and they'll sell their whatever assets they have somewhere else so they don't have to pay capital gains. That's what they'll do. It's worth it. I mean, he saved billions, right, just by doing that. Just idiots. Anyway, so that's going on. That's certainly, there's a lot of money they can squander out of that. They don't want that. It's about $750 million roughly a year they're hoping to extract from that. And the third one, really, which affects SEIU more than anybody else, the union, is this opt-out of your health care. Basically the initiative 2124 that allows people to say, listen, I don't think this long-term care scam is really worth having money extracted from my paycheck every single month. I don't want to do it, and I don't want to be part of it, don't want the benefit. So it doesn't end it. It just says that people have the option to get out of it. And because it's such a terrible deal and it's so crappy and it's such a bad law and everything about it was a disaster, SEIU knows that most people who have the ability to do math are going to opt out of that stupid idea and that scam because they know it's just a waste of money. But all that money gets extracted mostly by SEIU people, and so a lot of that money gets filtered back into the union. And so that's their primary mission, is to defend that. So those three initiatives are the three that they don't want to have hearings on right now. So when you say holding back, they're just trying to ignore them. That doesn't change the fact they're still going to be on the ballot in November. It just means that the Democrats are so embarrassed and incapable of really defending those three, and threatened by anybody that wants to take away those three cash stashes, that they aren't going to have a hearing on it. At least right now, it doesn't look like they're going to have a hearing on it. And originally they were going to have a hearing in their original internal conversations, so we're told, on the opt-out. But SEIU, since they control the Democrat Party at almost every level, SEIU came in and put the hammer down and said, there's no way you're going to do a hearing on that one. And so the Democrats, of course, they do the bidding of their masters. SEIU told them to jump. They said, how high? And that's what they did. They stopped having a hearing. But the three that they are going to have hearing on are police pursuit, and allowing police to have the ability to pursue criminals again. And again, that's just more of it just returns local control to the local police. And then the other one is parental being the primary stakeholder, parents being the primary stakeholder in their child's welfare, meaning that it eliminates it makes it so that parents have access to know what's going on medically with their kids and with what's going on in the school. That's also very popular, and then the third one is the no state income tax. The Democrats will be less threatened by, and I think the reason why they're putting the no income tax in that mix is that right now nobody's had a chance to impose a state income tax yet officially, even though the capital gains tax is essentially a state income tax just under another name. We have the only judges corrupt and dishonest enough in America, in our state Supreme Court, to pretend like that's not an income tax, even though everybody else would view it as an income tax. And those three initiatives are the ones they're going to have hearings on. And supposedly, according to the Observer, Query, I think, wrote this article, and I have no reason to disbelieve what he said, which is the Democrats will also hold a floor vote. If they're holding a floor vote on it, then that implies to me that they either know that they're going to reject it and they just want a couple of their members to get a jail-free card votes to say that they support them so that they don't have to fight that in November. Or there's a possibility they may decide that they're going to let these go and become law, and so they don't have to fight against all six in November, right? That could be what they're trying to do to narrow it down, which is interesting because the leftist groups that were organizing some of the and I just know people that got brought into some of these interviews. They do these focus group studies where they bring people in, and they're run by consultants for the left. And what they do is they put up a caricature, like the stupidest ad anybody could ever run, in favor, and then they run their really elaborate, slick advertisement against it. And they say, hey, does this influence how you would vote on these initiatives? And they do this because, not that they really care that they're influencing the people who are there or even care about their responses, but what they're trying to do is use those focus groups as the documentation and justification for the money that they hope to extract from Nick Hanauer and these other billionaires on the left in our state who fund all these little operations. and Soros, whoever, right? So they can get all this cash, and the consultants know that this is another gravy train operation for them, and so they want to get all this. They use these focus groups as a way to come in there and do it. And since I know some of the people that were in the focus groups, I know how poorly they were run. So the reality is that they aren't great focus groups. It gives me more encouragement that they're going to run poorly done campaigns, but they'll certainly spend a lot of money. And already you see Nick Hanauer and these other people kicking cash in. They're already getting millions of dollars set aside to try to oppose these initiatives. So all that's going on. Nobody's holding any initiatives back. The question is, do we have 3 wins next week because the legislature votes them in as law? And therefore we don't need to vote on those, and we're only going to have 3 on the ballot that we get a chance to vote for? Or are they just doing show hearings so that they can give a couple of their members who are in tough districts passes and then vote on all 6 in November? They can't prevent them from being voted on. The other option you mentioned there, sorry, Shannon, and that I didn't answer, was the idea that they could put an alternative on the ballot. I'm not sure that they're actually wanting to do that right now. I'm not sure that they have enough time still to do that. So it'll be interesting to see if that's what they try to do. But it's a rarely used option they have, which is an initiative comes to the legislature, and then what they do is they say, hey, we don't like the initiative, but we like this other version, and so the people's version comes out here and the political insiders version comes here, and so you vote, yes, I want to make a change, and I want option A or option B. It happened in King County a number of years ago when Iman helped out with that one initiative that shrank the council down from 13 to 9, the Cadillac Council initiative, and so where they put 2 different versions out there. So I've seen it done before. It's just usually, it's been, I think, since the 90s that they've done it at the state level. So we'll see. They could do it for those other 3, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. What is the status? Sue, you got a question here. What is the status of Liberty State? We need it now more than ever. Well, Liberty State, which is basically splitting off Eastern Washington and creating your own state, is it's a theory, right, out there that's been around for a while. And there's no status change. It's just it's the theory and a plan on how you could do that if you were going to do something like that. People who live within that area, of course, want it to happen, and people who don't live in it aren't as influenced by it because generally the maps show it as being just Eastern Washington. But it's just Eastern Oregon's dealing with that breakaway idea where they could go join Idaho as well. They're actually further along in Oregon doing it, but again, they're running into the fact that you can't make that change without congressional involvement and approval, and that I find is a pretty tough road to get to. You might be able to do it, but it goes up a little bit. Sonera Frankenstein, there used to be signs on the highways, keep Washington green, and $150 fine for littering, etc. Roads are literally lined with garbage now. Are there no laws being enforced anymore? Wow, that's a good question. A great question. I don't know whether they're actually enforcing the littering laws at all in Washington. After all, if you're Bob Ferguson and you're releasing the most violent sex predators in the history of Washington State and sticking them next to playgrounds and people's neighborhoods secretly, and you think that's a good idea and plan, and you're convincing people not to go to these local prosecutors, King County, Seattle, not so much in Seattle right now. You actually have a pretty good prosecutor in Seattle, but they're dealing with the historical legacy of not arresting criminals and, in fact, releasing them early. If you're letting people out for violent felonies and crime and car theft and all these other issues, are you really going to be out there enforcing littering laws? And this just goes back to the James Q. Wilson study, right, of the broken windows theory that people know with Rudy Giuliani going into New York City. But really, if you read some of James Q. Wilson's studies it was just crime and punishment and an analysis of criminal behavior, what they knew, essentially, by about 70 years ago, this was pretty well documented, and maybe 80 years ago is when they really started documenting it well. And it's common sense as well. The vast majority of crimes are committed by a much smaller, very small percentage of the population. It's the way it was 1,000 years ago. It's the way it was 100 years ago. It's the way it is today. Small group of people commit the vast majority of crimes. And if you're a murderer, it doesn't mean that you turn your nose up at shoplifting, right? You're willing to usually do any crime, regardless of whatever you've been caught for. most criminals that get caught have usually committed hundreds of other crimes that they weren't caught for. And so when you take that criminal out of circulation, you put them into jail, they're no longer out there prolifically committing crimes, which is what they do all the time. And again, it's a small percentage of the population. So when you put real criminals, career criminals, into jail and they stay in jail, then they're not out there committing crimes everywhere. Crime goes down. For Democrats, that seems to be an exotic and hard to understand concept. But for everybody else that lives in the real world, they know that this is true. So littering, if you're not going to be enforcing the crimes on real criminals, then so littering is probably a lower priority in that big scheme. Then you just start to lose track, and you run into the same problem that I saw when I used to live in New York City, which is why I have my T-shirt today. Columbia, located right in Manhattan. When I lived there, it was a crime cesspool before Rudy Giuliani became mayor, and nobody in Washington State has any idea what real crime is until they've lived in an environment like that. Even now, even as bad as Seattle's got now, it's still not as bad as New York was when I lived there back in the as a college student in the early 90s. So littering is probably just being ignored. Okay, so Boone, 22. How do the citizens remove elected officials who have failed to take office but are currently sitting in seats? Well, I don't know what you're really referring to there. When you say somebody's an elected official, but they failed to take office, I'm not actually sure what you're referring to. Sometimes people refer to that as they didn't sign a oath of office, maybe. I'm not sure what you mean by that. But generally, if you won an election, or I guess in some cases, if you were appointed as an interim person, then you simply have to vote them out again the next time they run for office. Removing somebody from office using a recall effort in Washington State is a relatively difficult task. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. And it requires you, like if you have an election coming up in the next 12 months, it's stupid to waste your time on a recall effort. Just go and run a real campaign and take them out of office or replace them. Removing somebody from office, malfeasance and misfeasance, and a violation of oath of office, those are three categories that you can remove somebody from office. But when you actually go out there and go through the process of doing it, it's both difficult and expensive and then legally tortuous to get through the initial stage of the process, because essentially you need a judge to approve it, and then it gets appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to uphold it. Now, they've done that before. They did that at the Fire District number 12, Mason County Fire District number 12, for the recall, successful recall election of all three of those elected officials out there for their grift and theft and bad behavior. They approved Kshama Sawant's recall, which failed. They have some of these. They've approved other recall efforts that just didn't succeed in gathering signatures. But it's a lot of work and a lot of energy, and anybody who's capable of running a good recall effort is going to be even more capable of running a good campaign if you can find somebody good to replace them. Otherwise, you're just taking out a bad person and getting another bad person in there without any really good plans. Let's see. Thank you, Sue. As always. Listen, I'm kind of curious to see who's on here. I've had some New Zealand folk. Just let me know where you're at. Just mention the city. It just helps me kind of get a sense of where people are logging in. The 50 or so people on right now. It's interesting just to see who's on and where you're coming from. I got a question here from Jason. Thoughts on the $250 million verdict against Trump? Will the AG seize his buildings? Oh, gosh, this is a good question. And I don't normally, on this show, I do try to talk about Washington issues. But from a national standpoint, the monetary damages that were arbitrarily assigned against Trump there, I don't care if you love Trump or not, that was an obscure, lawfare, insane result of that particular lawsuit. And the problem is by torturing the law and abusing the law and turning yourself into a banana republic where you're simply using this law to go out and threaten every single person who you don't like, or you know, in this case, going after Trump. One of the few people out there probably with the resources to kind of fight and push back on this stuff. And when it's so openly corrupt like that, I don't think some of these people are really thinking through the unintended, or maybe they just don't care about the consequences to it. But what sane business guy would ever be in New York again? I mean, you would be crazy to ever locate your business there. I'm going to be really surprised if a ton of people don't bail out of New York City, businesses bail out of New York City, because it's obvious that today they don't like Trump, but tomorrow they could just, if they set the precedent like this, they could come after anybody. That is a big threat. I mean, once you turn into a situation, our government has done this in the past, please don't think this is absolutely brand new. Things like this have happened before, but this is the first time I think we've really seen this level of drama in a generation or so, and abuse of the system. And I think it ripples everywhere. If you do it to one side, the other side's going to do it to you when they get in power. That's just what you're inviting. That it's going to happen, and it's insane that they're willing to destroy the country for their short-term political drama. Let's see, Sue, what is your opinion of Newhouse? So you're talking about Congressman Newhouse in the 4th Congressional District over there. Listen, I've interacted with Newhouse over the years. I don't have a lot of interaction with him because he's not my congressman. And we would probably, if we sat down on policies, we'd be different in a lot of policies. I would probably vote differently than he does in D.C. I'm not trying to just throw people under the bus here always, but he and I would be just different. We would approach things differently, and that's a safe Republican congressional seat, and he is a lot less conservative than his district, which is interesting to me. And the original election between him and Didier was really, really close. Didier probably would have won that if Slade Gordon hadn't pulled so much money away from other Republican candidates and dumped it in the congressional race in order to make sure that Clint Didier didn't prevail. It might have been better for Didier, though, to be Franklin County Commissioner than going back to Congress. I think Washington, D.C. is poisonous and destructive to normal people, and it is what it is. I think that Newhouse and Jamie Herrera Beutler were the two congressmen who voted to impeach Trump, and both of them have had to deal with the consequences of that vote. In the case of Herrera Beutler, she lost the election. Newhouse was managed to survive, but he's clear. His primary results were pathetic. Probably one of the lowest primary results that we've seen of a sitting congressman in a long time. It appears to me that he's been trying to do a lot to rehabilitate that image within the district, which probably makes sense in that district, and what you would have to do if you want to stay there. With Cathy McMorris Rodgers announcing that she's stepping down, which she's in the next district over, right, Spokane area, it kind of creates a vacancy in the congressional delegation, at least from the Republican side. That's a big one, a big deal. So I'm not sure, how that affects Newhouse or the tension on Newhouse, but I think he's likely to be primaried for the rest of his existence in Congress, and I don't think there's any way for him to avoid that unless he suddenly became a new born-again, super conservative guy with his votes. But I will say he's probably shifted a little bit of some of his votes because of some of that blowback. But who knows? Some people really care about being in politics more than they care about what they believe in, and I don't. And I'm not trying to say that that's him, but who knows? This is people. When I was in college and I went down to D.C. and spent a little bit of time down there, there was a reason why I wanted to get off the East Coast as fast as I could. I had zero interest in going to work for the different people that offered me jobs down there. I had no interest in being in D.C. Because I just think it's poisonous, and you lose your soul being back there. Catherine, you got a question here. Will you be attending the Spokane GOP County Convention March 2nd? No, I'm not going to be there. I will be at the Spokane County State Convention, which is actually in April. I don't think I'm actually March 2nd. I'm speaking. I'm the MC that night in the Lewis County GOP's Lincoln Day dinner, so that's why I won't be there. Let's see, Donald Larson. Let's see. Okay, actually, there's two questions here. So Pam McGill first. Your question on Inslee's remarks calling local leaders of Kenmore feckless. Oh, that's a great one. So this is a good case. Thank you for asking that question, Pam. That was a good question. It was a video I wanted to do today, didn't get to, and it had to do with Kenmore, which is not a conservative bastion, right? It's a little city, North Lake Washington, right next to Seattle, kind of next to Kirkland, in that area. And there was, the typical, usual, I can't remember the name of the group now. They wanted to, it's another one of these homeless, industrial complex organizations that's just one big grant grifting operation where they basically want to stick 100-person druggie camp operation, low barrier, meaning no rules, for drug addicts and criminals right in the middle of the city of Kenmore. And good for the people of Kenmore. which clearly wasn't a Republican group, right? And this is going to be Democrats generally. But they got together and showed up at that city council, and they were upset and angry, as any sane person would be, about this ridiculous and poorly thought out and wasteful and destructive blight on their community being stuck right in the middle. And there was probably some backroom deals, to be fair, that the Kenmore City Council, because they've been leveraged by Dow Constantine and Jay Inslee and all these other lefty groups to force this to happen. And the blowback and the community anger about it, just like it's been in Kent and Renton and Federal Way and Burien and elsewhere around the state, they were angry. People, citizens, it's not a secret anymore what happens when you do this. It's just like taking a little bomb and setting it off in the middle of your community. And the citizens came out and rejected it. And to the Kenmore City Council's credit, they voted it down. They said they don't want it. And of course, that same group, by the way, went over to Redmond and worked out some back deal with the Democrats in charge of Redmond, and so they're putting it into Redmond. And they mentioned just recently, when they did that, they said that they don't have enough drug addicts or criminals in Redmond to fill it, so they're going to have to recruit the criminals and drug addicts from other cities and bring them into Redmond. So if you live in Redmond, you have clowns in political office that are probably completely corrupt. Whoever voted for that and thought it was a good idea should be removed. And now you've got this little corruption future criminal drug den operation that they're planning to build in Redmond, and boy, did they move fast. Inslee was angry because Kenmore didn't do his bidding, and so he came out there and attacked Kenmore, these Democrats, and it pulled them. It was a big pressure game from both Inslee and Dow Constantine. This money that is going into this homeless industrial complex is spreading through all these political guys and all their kickback schemes with their donors and everything else. They're all corrupt on this. It is not sane. It is not rational. It is not honest to support these projects. The people who are supporting them are not good people, and Inslee just didn't like somebody not supporting him. Not a conservative thing. This was just a couple people that live in Kenmore and care more about Kenmore than Inslee's little kickback scheme that he was planning to run on it. The question that I meant to get to then earlier, Donald Larson, question about, I thought they had to hold a hearing on it by law, which is in the state legislature. And that's true. They should, and they do. The question is, just because the law says that's what they have to do, what's the penalty for them not holding a hearing on it? And it's not clear how you would force them to hold a hearing on it. Now that they're holding a hearing on 3 of these initiatives, that's a big step in the right direction. And we'll see if we can get them to hold a hearing on the other 3. We'll find out. Friday, we're going to do that rally. Maybe we can keep putting the pressure. Fib, hello, we are governed. What do you think about the former days in for the homeless and the drug use and all the crime it is causing? Well, I don't know which Days Inn, but I'm assuming you're talking about the Lacey Days Inn, because I did a story on that a couple years ago about how the city of Olympia basically were taking these drug addicts and they were closing down Camp Inslee, which is along Capitol Lake. It was a massive homeless camp, a big drug operation. I don't know that the Sinaloa drug cartel specifically controlled it, but it was essentially run by drug dealers. And it was a good fencing operation. They were finding, some people had died back there. It wasn't going great. Inslee could see it from his backyard, and I think that they decided finally they need to clean it up because it was listen, I went and took video of it myself. It was a state embarrassment. Most third world countries looked a lot better than what it looked like along Capitol Lake. And so when they were closing that down, one of the things they did with the homeless drug addicts, and they were almost all drug addicts who lived there, they said, listen, if you're willing, we'll put you indoors and let you stay at the Days Inn, which, by the way, wasn't in Olympia. It was in Lacey, next door. It was across the boundary. So without telling the city of Lacey or the Lacey PD, they moved a bunch of these people into this Days Inn. And several of them immediately got kicked out for violating the rules. I don't know if they had fires inside their rooms or they were meth labbing it or whatever they were doing, but many of them got kicked out. Some of them managed to stay there for a while. They just trashed the Days Inn. Garbage started appearing everywhere. That's what happens when you bring drug addicts in, and it doesn't get better. And so that whole nightmare, I'm not actually sure where it's going right now and how far along it's gone, but it's just a crazy situation. These are the kind of things that when you have these terrible people in office, these horrible elected officials, and when there's so much money and so much corruption and no accountability and no transparency, and it's very difficult to figure out what's actually happening, and this whole thing binds together and it just grows and it bloats out more and more, then it doesn't produce any good outcome. So switching back with you here, this is a question from Pat Caldwell. Do we have any stats on the number of illegals transported to Washington since Biden? Good question. I am not aware of any official stats on illegals that have been here. Remember, we had some coming back in the Obama era, too, to Washington. They'll argue that they were trying to bring most of them to Eastern Washington for, picking crops or something like that, hops or something. But that's probably not the majority of people that were being brought in. Certainly not now, who are not U.S. citizens, so illegals that are being brought in. But they try to keep that really quiet and secret. And I'm going to tell you something. Under the Trump administration, when I was trying to get some of this information from them, they kept it secret too. They wouldn't give us any information. We were trying to use it as a voter roll cleanup strategy to figure out who wasn't a U.S. citizen and who was here even legally as like a green card holder or something like that. We could verify that they weren't elected. And when I tried to get that information from the Trump administration, they didn't give it to me. So I would hope that they would change. If you do have a Republican in that position, we need to fix this issue. But I don't have any idea what the numbers are. We got a sense of it with the $460 million that were squandered from COVID cash that was supposed to go to help local citizens and instead got diverted to non-U.S. citizens. But I don't know exactly how many that really represents. You're talking, though, more than 100,000, right? Let's see. TZ Burton got a question. I have a hard time on the Washington State Legislature bill page. Would you be willing to do a tutorial on how to navigate that page? TZ, I would, but I have to tell you, I think some other people have done this already, and I don't know that I'd do any different than what they have done. There are some of the classes that have been done on it. I would be good at it, but I wouldn't be excellent. And so I would want somebody who's excellent to do that tutorial. Probably wouldn't be me. I'm familiar with it. Obviously, I can navigate it. But you'd want somebody who's even better than I am probably putting that on. Jason, should business get out of New York, Illinois, and California if they uphold the Trump verdict? Well, if I had a business in those states, I would leave. And I certainly, if I had a business, I'd never go there in the first place. I would definitely start somewhere else. And by the way, it's been that way in all three of the states for a long, long time. Washington has actually been generally a pretty good place to have a business. The capital gains tax, the B&O tax, a couple other things are starting to shift that calculation a bit, but it's still generally pretty good. But California and Illinois and New York are in a competition to see how fast they can basically deep six their own opportunities in the future, and they're not paying attention to see how it goes. Last one, this is from TZ Burton. HP, I'm assuming you mean HB 2331, modifying requirements for public school instructional. Can this one get stopped? I don't know enough about that one. So it's not one that I've heard it, at least referenced there. I'd have to look it up, and I don't usually try to do that while I'm doing a live stream. But it's just another one of those bills. I'm not sure. I would look at it, see how far along it is, and then see where it's going. By the way, this is funny. So Eatonville, Chehalis, Yakima, Olympia, the heart of Libtardville, which I'm assuming is Olympia. Heart of Darkness, I call it sometimes, Tacoma. So good. Thank you guys for being on. Don't know if we have our viewer from Auckland, but it's always fun when somebody from New Zealand logs on. I don't know what they think about how crazy our politics are here, but it's just interesting to me that somebody would. Jason, what are your thoughts that the permit to purchase an insurance mandate failing this session, will Ferguson pursue this as governor? Well, Ferguson will probably pursue whatever I think Ferguson is just going to pursue whatever he thinks Nick Hanauer wants him to pursue, because he views the Nick Hanauer crew, the Michael Bloomberg crew, the billionaires that want to take your guns crew. That's one of Ferguson's little slush fund conduits for campaign cash. And so he'll do whatever they tell him to do. I mean, Ferguson's essentially a puppet of those guys. So if they tell him to do it, he'll do it. If they don't, he won't. So we'll have to see. The more interesting one related was the attack on FFL holders, and it's been really watered down substantially since the original proposed bill. So it's coming out. It's an annoying restriction, but it's not quite what it's not quite what as bad as it was originally. It doesn't make it good, of course. It was still bad, but it wasn't as crazy as it was before. Sue Smith, you had a recent recently had a video about training to be an activist, but we also hear a lot of being the gray man. Gray man. When you're elderly, what is a happy medium? Okay, this is a good question. I like this because it's a philosophical question, a little bit. And here's why I like it, because I've heard that before. Any of you that don't know, the gray man theory, right, is just that, and it's kind of a prepper theory too that's out there now. It's funny the terms that people use for this now, but this is an old idea that goes back a long ways. And the idea is just that, hey, listen, I don't want to put my head up too high and get noticed as the guy causing problems, because when times get tough or government gets more abusive, I'm the first guy that gets pounded down, right? And so I want to be gray, I want to be invisible, I want to be hidden, I don't want anybody to look at me too much. I mean, to some extent, that's the way I am with my junker cars, right? I drive usually very boring and totally uninteresting vehicles, and it helps me get into Seattle and around different places because nobody really knows what vehicle I drive. Heck, I have a hard time finding them in the parking lot myself. So you blend in, right? You just blend in. So that's the theory. Now, being an activist, you're going to stand out. You have to stand out because there's no way to avoid it. You're basically going public and confronting bad guys. When you're with a team of activists, not everybody wants or is probably capable of being that person to stand out and be openly confrontational with government. It takes a certain personality and it takes a certain willingness to take a lot of heat. Not just like basic death threats and litigation and stuff like that, but usually a lot of really negative heat that you're going to take. And it's done as an intimidation and power tactic, I think, by the left, because they know that most people get intimidated and they'll go away, right? You put a little pressure on somebody and most people go away. I mean, the average person doesn't want any attention on them like that. And so not everybody's got the fortitude to take that kind of pressure. In any group of people that you have who are organizing and try to fix things in your community, not everybody has to be the guy out there doing things like what I do. It's very open and very public. There's no doubt who I am, and it's not a secret, right? So somebody like me would stand out. But most of the people I work with don't. And there's a place for everybody. So researchers, whistleblowers, workers that are doing different projects or different projects with me, they're not necessarily like some kind of spy ring or super secret. I mean, some of the whistleblowers might qualify as that, but generally they're just people out there they want to help you, but they don't want to be the first person in the hearing. They don't want to be the named person in a lawsuit. And so I try to keep people's identity secret is, in some cases, yes, secret, but other times just really I'm not talking about them, right? And one group of activists I'm not necessarily exposing to another group of activists all the time. When you need to work together, it makes sense, but a lot of times that's just how it is. So when you're trying to make an impact, not everybody has to be that open activists, right? Some people can be they can ghostwrite the articles. They can help write the articles. And I'll give you an example of something that just came up just recently for me. And this has actually been ongoing for a year. I have a great story that needs to be told out of Kittitas County. And it's a guy who's been just abused over a long period of time. Their business was destroyed by, I think, some corrupt judges, some corrupt bureaucrats for sure, Department of Ecology employee. But it's a difficult story to sit down and write. I mean, it's taken me hours and hours of going through source documents. This family has done an amazing job with records requests, documenting the whole thing, but it's very complex. It's very personal. It's very detailed. And when I do articles or stories like this, I really want to get all the source documents in a row and the timeline. You have to be able to take this complex story and communicate it to people in a way that they can understand it. If you can't do that, it's a failure, right? You might as well not even do the story if you can't communicate it well. They deserve to have the story told because they were completely wronged. The people that abused them and abused the legal process tried to hide records and destroy records, which he was able to uncover like years later. Just an amazing dogged success. I mean, I'm just so impressed. This is just one of these stories where I'm super impressed with the people, the family, what they've endured, and their willingness to stay focused despite the abuse and harassment to get to the truth at the end of the day. It's a hard story to tell. And what I really, I was realizing, like, what I really need is somebody to sit down and because I get interrupted constantly. I'm constantly dealing with issues and drama and chaos and projects and things I'm dealing with. And so that interruption takes you away from being able to get that story done. And it's sitting there in my inbox. Not the only one. I probably have several dozen stories like this, but it's one that weighs on me because I put a lot of time into it already. And I need to have somebody write it, right? That person could help me write that article, for example. I'm just using this as an example. And nobody needs to know that you did that, right? I'll review it. I'll make sure it makes sense to me and that it's accurate and all the source documents together. But it takes, you're probably looking at 20 hours to sit down and really, match this, make sure that you're talking to the people who are involved, make sure you're tracking the story, a lot of revisions, a lot of editing. It's a very, very difficult story. That's an example of something an activist could do, and they don't have to be as public. Sorry about going off on that was a long tangent. But anyway, that's it. Let's see. Jason, will Inslee call a special session to ram through gun control? Nope, I don't think so. Somebody's going to have to bribe Inslee with an incredible amount of money, and I don't even think these guys have that kind of money sitting around that openly bribe the governor that much on gun control. And remember, there's other things going on. So when they do these special sessions, remember one of the things that happens is the politicians can't collect money and they can't campaign during session. They can't. They're totally, and actually that applies also to statewide office holders too. So incumbents are completely locked up. They can't spend their money. They can't raise money. They can't run a campaign during session. Every Democrat that's on the ballot this next cycle wants to be out there raising money and campaigning. They all do. And so Inslee pulling him back in for an ego project on gun control, no way. I don't see him doing that. And it'd be very hard. He's been blasted heavily by his own party and people in the past for doing that. I don't think he would do it now. Patrick, why do people get to vote on school bonds that don't have property, yet property owners are the ones paying the tax? Great question. And that's how it works, right? Property taxes are the kind of thing that everybody ends up paying property taxes, even if you're a renter and you don't think that you do, you do. So when those taxes are passed, people will think, well, it's just some other property owner that pays it. But the reality is when taxes increase enough, then the property owner is going to pass on that property tax increase to the person who's renting, right? Even if the renter doesn't realize it, that's what's happening with it. Everybody gets stuck paying property taxes. However, the big bite that comes out is, of course, residents, people who live in a home, and about 60% now, I think, of your property taxes go to schools, one way or the other, state portion plus the local levies. And so, yeah, a whole bunch of people can vote, but that don't. But if they were really thought, the people who support these taxes, if they really thought that they were as popular as they might appear sometimes during a special election, they would run those property tax proposals, the bonds or the levies. They would run them in November, and they don't. And they don't because they're relying on apathy and ignorance to get those passed. That's the basic theory now. I don't think that's working as well as it used to, and so I'm not sure that's a great plan. The whole video that I did that I hope to launch pretty soon about all the failed bonds this cycle in particular is partially because people are starting just to get angry and frustrated and push back against it. So we'll see how that goes. What is Washington going to do when Bobby wins in November? Moist, this is what is Washington going to do? Well, I mean, it kind of depends, right? I'm sure that, obviously Fergie is a super corrupt guy, so it'll be just a cleaning house for corruption. But if he were to get in, so I hope that he doesn't. So hopefully we are able to run some kind of campaign. Ferguson's very unpopular as a general rule. He's also not that well known. I was with some people and we tried to do a quick experiment in Seattle to see how many people knew who Ferguson was. And a shockingly large number of people didn't even know who he was. They'd never heard of him before. They knew who Inslee was, but they didn't know who Ferguson was. So Ferguson doesn't have enough money yet to get that name recognition the way that he needs to. So if he wants to win, he knows that he's going to be trying to run a pretty significant campaign of name recognition, if nothing else. Have they cleaned up the area behind the Department of Ecology? I still listen to that podcast you do with Todd Herman, the funniest piece of audio tape. That's funny. Yeah, they cleaned up the main area. I just drove by there the other day. I I suspect, though, that there's still landfill type stuff on the Department of Ecology property. I've been meaning to go back in there and look again where I think there's an illegal landfill still going on. And I don't know how much of it's because the homeless, druggy, junkie camps or not, but yeah, there's something going on back there. But it's not as bad or as obvious as it was in the past. Thank you, Jason. That was kind of funny because I forgot about that story. It was a good one. Let's see. Here's a question. Brian, are you going to be at the Capitol rally on Friday? Yes, I am. I'll be there. And hopefully I'll see you there too. The Tonro watching channels that have been covering the border mini asked were saying they are going to Seattle recently. Well, that sucks. I don't want more illegals coming to Seattle, but it doesn't surprise me that some of them might be. Jason, is it true that they're going after businesses for the COVID fines? Well, when you say they, I'm assuming you mean L&I or the Attorney General. Some of those fines have gone away, so I haven't heard anything lately about their aggressiveness. I know Spiffy's, Stuffy's, some of that one place, there's some of those places really got abused by it, but I'm not sure that they're still aggressively going after it in the same way. A lot of them seem to kind of fade away once they got off the headlines, but I don't know that's true. I'd have to go back and look into that. It's a good question. Old school, Glenn, can you cover the story about the homeless village that they are forcing on Spanaway? Look up the Stop Village Spanaway. Yeah, I'm happy to cover it. I mean, a lot of these are the same story over and over again. Just Puyallup, Olympia, Lacey, Rochester, Tenino, right? You're just switching out the name of the city. It's the same game, same crew, same corruption, same homeless industrial complex world. That's how they do. That's how they operate. The himself, I left Idaho for Washington to save on taxes. Okay. Idaho generally has lower taxes, although they do have an income tax. So maybe Washington, unless you make so much that you would have to pay on the capital gains tax, which is going to be lowered soon, that may not have been the best option. If that was that was the only reason you came over. Let's see, keep going. Okay, I see property tax is what you're talking about. I saw it later on. So, I'm not actually that familiar with Idaho property taxes. Then Boise would be probably the worst in Idaho. Let's see, keep going down. Sorry, guys, you had a ton of comments. I don't have any questions here. Oh, yeah. Stefan, Glenn, have you read HB 2331? Was that the same bill that somebody else asked me about up above? Okay, this is, it wants to keep explicit books out of school and school libraries. Okay. I'm familiar with the debate, right, that's going on right now. One of the funny things about this, right, is that the argument about censorship or book banning is very funny because the left is the primary organization right now, an entity and group of people in philosophy that's deciding they want to censor, right? They censor Huckleberry Finn, right? They censor Animal Farm. They don't want people to see 1984. They don't want people to read Ayn Rand. They don't want people to read, Road to Serfdom, or Henry DeSoto, or von Mises, or Dr. Seuss. I mean, the left has been censoring like crazy, not just online. And it's so funny for me to hear them saying book banning, because the big fight that has been going on lately has been pornography and explicit pornography indoctrination kind of books that are being fed to younger children in the public school system and using the public library as a vehicle to deliver them. And the same people who claim that they don't want to have book banning would never allow you, if you were conservative, let's just say I want to write a book about the corruption of the Democrats in Washington State. And I say, I'm going to donate this to the library. They would move heaven and earth to prevent that book from being in the school library. So these book banners are mostly the left. It's funny, though, that the one time that they'll stand up for and oppose censorship is when they think that parents saying that they don't want their kids looking at explicit content, sexual content in the in the school system is the book banning. I just find that, it is amusing if you actually know what's going on with these that particular fight. Let's see, Donald Larson, Kirkland, any progress on accountability for the politicians of the COVID policy failure and the ongoing excess death rates and limiting emergency powers of government? Great question. Actually, that's a really good one, Don. Thank you. No, nothing's going on to hold any politician, certainly in our state, accountable for the abuse of COVID policy they had. Of the people that were most explicitly tied into this, really, you look at Inslee, obviously, as governor, abusing the emergency powers of the governor's office, but also Ferguson, egregiously and out of control, abusing his office as attorney general to just attack citizens. The same guy that'll do anything he can to release the most violent criminals in Washington state and then dump them into our communities, went completely overboard in attacking small businesses with nominal violation of Inslee's clearly overreach and abusive policies. So those are the two most obvious political class sort of people. You might have had some local people do crazy stuff too, but there's no progress being made on any accountability for this at all. And the excess death rates, you're really looking at something more on a national level. And more stories are coming out right now of the CDC concealing information and lying, covering things up. It's an amazing collapse of credibility pretty much across the spectrum of the medical system, which I think is more interesting. Now, the second part of your question, which is limiting emergency powers of governor, now that has been making progress, but the best way to make that progress is to have a Republican governor get elected, and then the Democrats will suddenly discover that restricting the powers of the governor is a good idea. I would take advantage of that and actually use it. First, step in as a Republican governor, use those powers to its fullest extent, the way they exist or interpreted now, until the Democrats finally hold you decide to pass change the Constitution to restrict it, which would be fun if they did that. That's what I would do if I was Republican governor, just hammer until the Democrats finally discover or rediscover constraint, and that would be a good thing to do. The old school, you got a question about the village they plan for Spanaway includes RVs, no substance abuse oversight. There's a meeting at the library on the 3rd. That's good. I'm glad that they're being involved. You can make a big impact, and a lot of these go away when you get more engaged. Jason, you got a question here about do you think the House will expel Matt Gaetz? I have no idea what's going on in D.C. or how those guys make their decisions. If the Republicans are idiotic enough to think that that's their highest priority in D.C., then obviously we don't need them in their D.C. anymore. They need to start doing things to actually downsize our government, not just expel members they don't like internally. Let's see. Well, old school, you got to promote that meeting. You're saying nobody knows about the meeting and to stop the village. I would be sharing that everywhere on Nextdoor, Facebook, emails. Do everything you can, because you really need to focus on people who live in Spanaway. They're the ones that are going to be the most effective. Why do people see, Fibno, we the governed, why do people see the homeless as down on their luck instead of drug-addicted criminals, in your opinion? Well, that's actually not hard to answer. There's a certain level of virtue signaling that people want to have, and I've seen this since I was in college, and I had to fight my way through beggars and grifters to get to my dorm room. When I had a dorm that was off campus, I had to fight my way through these guys, 5, 6 of them. They would have like a little part of the block that you had to walk through so I could get on campus, and they're always begging you. They had some story. A bunch of them, there was this guy that used to fake like he was had a disease, and I actually thought it was real for years until I saw him suddenly walk into Harlem and then suddenly start walking normal. It's just, I got to see all these con artists that were working the campus and all over New York City for years. And so people give money not because they care about the person they're giving money to, but because it makes them feel good, right? That's really what people are doing, is they're giving them that charity to them. They don't want to think too much about how that money is being used, and they certainly don't want to consider why it is that same person's back, no matter how much money they get. Within a day or two, at the same place, begging for money. So people always, too, want to see, they want to believe a story that's given to them that makes them feel like, because it makes them feel good, right? It's not about the person that they are giving the money to. It's about themselves. They want to make themselves feel good. So But if you've ever been around drug addicts, or you've ever been around these homeless camps and actually understand how many people are drug addicted and caught up in substance abuse of some kind there, then I think that really changes your perspective on what's actually going on. It doesn't mean that somebody can't fall down and be hard, run into tough times. We've all been there. I mean, especially if you've had ups and downs. I've had ups and downs, and you fall in hard times. But I'm going to tell you what, I never moved into a druggy junkie camp and set up a meth lab in my house or in my tent and burn down the woods because that was where I was at. I don't know anybody that does that except for drug addicts, and that's really what we're seeing right now. There's no surprise that Portland leads the country in the growth of overdose deaths and drug addiction deaths in Portland because of their genius plan to legalize hard drugs. It doesn't work very well. Let's see. Let's see. TZ Burton, our roadways have a ton of garbage. Can we get homeless working to pick up the garbage along the road and then pay them? Well, good question. I mean, that's a policy you could offer. You're going to find that very few of them are going to decide to do that. I'm not sure the quality you're going to get. That is a way they used to do this as part of a service project that you could get to go out and do that, to pay off a fine or community service of some kind. They also used to use convicts, and I think they still do in some cases, to go out and do that, but I haven't seen that so much lately, so I don't know if they've changed that policy too. Let's see, guys. It's 43. I'm a little late, so let me. There's a last couple comments here, but not really. But not really anybody with any questions here. But thank you guys so much for participating. I believe next week, I'm still planning to do this on Tuesday. I got 3 videos that are launching this week. If you are one of the people I'm meeting out in the Tri-Cities, I'm looking forward to seeing you, and optimistic about some of the headway I think that we can make while I'm out there. Otherwise, next week, looking forward to seeing anybody that's out there in the Okanagan, and I'm assuming that's an OMAC is what I'm remembering, but I got to double check where that was. I'll announce it at my live stream next week. And if you're in Kitsap or Lewis County, I'm sure I'll see you at the Lincoln Day dinners there. And there's other activities coming up. I'm not going that far out at field. I know I'll be in Skagit, Whatcom, Spokane, but and the Caper banquet, I believe, that I'm doing end of March. A lot of stuff is happening out there. I do encourage you, stay engaged, stay involved. The legislative session's coming up to an end. I'll see you Friday at the rally at the Capitol if you want to try to convince the Democrats to have hearings on the other 3 initiatives as well. And we'll just see what kind of headway we're able to make. Nothing predicts what the future is going to happen, but I guarantee you can't make change unless you're willing to show up and get engaged. As I always say, the future belongs to those who show up. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Add your comments down below if there's something I missed. Don't forget to share and subscribe. I always forget to say this. Like the videos, share and subscribe. Subscribe to my website. I haven't been doing a lot of articles lately, but I will be doing them pretty soon. A lot's going on. I'm really probably only just scratching the surface, so I hope that you feel like you're getting some value from this. Got a lot of things to try to do to improve I've got some guys helping me to make this better. So I'm hoping that I get your feedback of what you'd like to see and moving forward. And otherwise, guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the day. I got to hit the road. Got a lot of driving to do even tonight. But just remember, the future belongs to those who show up, guys. Thank you.